You know what is funny about wanting something until you actually get it? Sometimes, you realize you are asking for all the wrong things. I am Valerie. I am 29 years old, and I just learned this lesson in the most humiliating way possible. James and I had what everyone called a solid marriage. 3 years in, a decent apartment in downtown Seattle, splitting bills like responsible adults. He worked as a high school history teacher. Steady paycheck, reliable as clockwork, home by 4 in the afternoon. Me? I was a marketing director for a boutique firm. High stress, high reward. On paper, we were winning at life. In reality, I was dying of boredom. Do not misunderstand. James is genuinely a good guy. The type who remembers anniversary dates. The type who listens when you complain about your coworkers. But that was exactly the problem. He was safe, predictable, the human equivalent of beige wallpaper. Inoffensive, but completely forgettable. Our bedroom situation was tragic. James approached intimacy like he approached everything else. Careful, methodical, asking if I was comfortable every 5 minutes. Sweet? Sure. Exciting? Not even close. I would hint about trying new things, maybe getting adventurous. He would get awkward and mumble about being happy with how things are. Meanwhile, I am reading articles online about couples rekindling their spark, and open relationships kept appearing as this magical solution. Success stories about stepping outside marriage, actually saving it, how experiencing other people makes you appreciate what you have. Those articles conveniently skipped the disaster stories, but honestly, I was not looking for those anyway. I started testing waters with James. Casual comments about how young we were, how maybe we were settling into old married couple territory too early, how some friends seemed more adventurous than us. James would nod thoughtfully, but change subjects. That is the thing about James, he is a people pleaser. Especially with me. 2 weeks of strategic conversations, and maybe some tears about feeling sexually unfulfilled. That finally cracked him. We sat down with wine and hammered out rules. No mutual friends. No emotional attachments. Random hookups did not require disclosure, but anything regular needed transparency. Simple, clean, mature. James asked repeatedly if I was sure this would help us. Every single time, I said absolutely. What I did not mention was that I already had someone in mind. Dominic worked for a corporate law firm in our building. We had been playing this flirty dance for months. Casual elevator conversations, lingering eye contact during lunch breaks, him finding excuses to visit my floor, the kind of attention that reminded me what being wanted felt like. Within a week of the agreement, I made my move. I stayed late one night, accidentally ran into Dominic by the elevators. When he suggested drinks, I did not hesitate. 3 drinks in, I casually mentioned James and I had opened our marriage. Dominic's eyes lit up, like a predator seeing an unlocked gate. Our first hookup happened during a lunch break at some hourly hotel, Dominic knew. It was everything my marriage was not. Passionate, spontaneous, dangerous. Dominic knew exactly what he wanted and was not afraid to take it. For the first time in months, I felt alive. James noticed immediately. I was happier, more energetic. I actually initiated sex for the first time in weeks. When he asked what changed, I smiled and said the new arrangement was working. He seemed genuinely pleased I was happy, which made me feel simultaneously guilty and vindicated. About a month in, James mentioned chatting with women on dating apps. Nothing serious yet, just testing waters like me. I felt this weird jealousy ping, which was ridiculous since I was sneaking around with Dominic twice weekly. But I pushed it down and told him I was happy for him. I genuinely thought I was. I thought, good for him. Maybe he will stop looking at me with those puppy dog eyes waiting for approval. Dominic and I fell into a routine quickly. Lunch breaks twice weekly, sometimes after work drinks when James had his own dates. Dominic was everything James was not. Confident, aggressive, boundary pushing. He made me feel like the sexiest woman alive, instead of someone's comfortable wife. The first time James actually hooked up with someone, he came home glowing. Different cologne on his shirt, a lightness in his step I had not seen in ages. When I asked how it went, he just smiled and said, "Good." Before changing subjects, that one-word answer bothered me more than a detailed recap would have. But I had Dominic. So what did it matter? James could have his little adventures. I was getting exactly what I wanted. stability at home, excitement on the side. Perfect. Except James was slowly transforming into someone I barely recognized. Someone more confident, mysterious, interesting. Someone becoming everything I had wanted him to be. Just not for me. Month 2 brought complications I had not anticipated. Dominic started suggesting dinner after our hotel visits. Real dates. Not just sex and goodbye. Weekend texts asking about my day, sharing stories from his week. It felt like having a secret boyfriend. And after years of feeling invisible in my marriage, the attention was intoxicating. James was having his own evolution. He had started working out, ordered home equipment, bought better-fitting clothes, going out more often, staying later, coming home with energy I had not seen since we first dated. It should have made me happy. This was supposed to be about becoming better versions of ourselves. Instead, it made me feel unsettled, like watching a stranger wear my husband's face. According to our rules, I had to disclose when Dominic and I became serious. One night over dinner, I casually mentioned starting to see someone regularly. Someone I really liked. James looked up, fork halfway to his mouth. That is good. I am glad you are happy. His name is Dominic, I continued, watching for reactions. He is a lawyer. I was lying about where he worked. Admitting I was dating a guy from the same building felt too messy. James asked polite questions. How long? Was Dominic a good guy? Did I feel safe? All very mature and supportive. So why did his calm acceptance frustrate me? What about you? I asked. Any dates turning serious? James got this little smile. A smile I used to get when he looked at me. Actually, yes. There is this woman. Sophie. We have been seeing each other a few weeks. She is really something. That smile. The way his face lit up saying her name. Something twisted in my stomach that I did not want to examine. Tell me about her, I said, trying to sound supportive instead of nosy. James just shrugged. You will meet her eventually. We are taking things slow. Taking things slow. Meanwhile, he had met Dominic once. When Dominic picked me up from our apartment building lobby, awkward as hell. But at least I was being transparent. James was keeping his mystery woman hidden like a state secret. Changes in James became impossible to ignore. More confident. Decisive. When I would make passive-aggressive comments about dishes or bills, my usual attention-getting method, he would just handle it. Without lengthy discussion. Without apologizing profusely like he used to. He started having opinions about movies. Restaurants. Weekend plans that did not include me. Dominic noticed I was distracted during dates. Asked if everything was okay at home. If James was giving me grief. I said everything was fine. But honestly, James was not giving me anything anymore. He was present, but absent. Physically there, but emotionally elsewhere. This new James was incredibly attractive. The confidence, the mystery, the way he carried himself like he had secrets worth keeping. Everything I had wanted him to be when we married. Except now, he was becoming that person for someone else. I started paying closer attention to his schedule, his moods, his phone habits. James had always been an open book. Phone lying around. Never minded if I glanced at messages. Now, he kept it face down. Took it to the bathroom. Smiled at texts he did not share. When I asked about Sophie again, James deflected. Said they were still figuring things out. Did not want to jinx anything. But his whole demeanor changed when mentioning her. Softer, happier, like thinking about something wonderful. Dominic was pushing for more commitment. Started talking future plans. Trips we could take. How nice if I could spend whole nights instead of stolen hours. You know, this is not sustainable forever, Dominic said one afternoon in our usual hotel room. Eventually, you will have to choose. Choose what? Whether you want a real relationship, or you are content being a part-time girlfriend forever. For the first time since this started, I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake. What I had with Dominic was exciting, but also complicated, and built on lies. What I had with James was stable, but he was slipping away more each day. Month 4 brought the conversation I had been dreading. Dominic had been dropping hints about his firm's expansion. Opportunities in other cities, excitement about starting fresh somewhere new. I thought it was pillow talk, until he made it real. My firm is opening a New York branch, he said, tracing circles on my shoulder. They want me heading the litigation team. My stomach dropped. When? Next month. Huge opportunity, senior partner track, big salary bump, the whole package. He looked down at me with those dark, demanding eyes. I want you to come with me. I stared at the ceiling, processing what he was asking. Dominic, I am married. I cannot just move to New York. Why not? What is keeping you here? A husband who treats you like a roommate? A marriage that is basically over? His voice was gentle but insistent. We could have something real, Valerie. No more sneaking around. Just us, building a life together. The offer was tempting. Dominic made good money, better than James, and he actually wanted me. Not the polite, distant version James had settled for, but the real, passionate me. In New York, I could be someone new, but reality kicked in. James and I owned our place together, had merged finances, 3 years of financial entanglement. Starting over at 29 felt thrilling and terrifying. I need time to think, I told Dominic, which was wrong based on how his face changed. Time to think about what? Whether you want happiness or staying stuck in a dead marriage? It is not that simple. There is a lot to consider. He sat up, pulling away physically and emotionally. You know what I think? You like having options. Me as your exciting secret, while keeping James as your safety net. But I am not interested in being your backup plan anymore. The accusation stung because it was partially true. James was my safety net. Dominic was my adventure. But it was more complicated than Dominic understood. Dominic gave me 2 weeks to decide. Come to New York and build something real. Or stay in my pretend marriage and lose him forever. I spent those weeks in weird limbo. Dominic was distant but available, treating remaining hookups like goodbye sex. James was more present than he had been in months, but politely detached, making me feel like a guest in my own life. James had started talking about Sophie more openly, sharing stories about dates, conversations, things they had in common. She worked as a pediatric nurse, loved hiking, read the same history books he did. She sounded perfect for him, in ways that made my chest tight. You should bring her by sometime, I heard myself say one night. I would like to meet her. James looked surprised. Really? I thought you preferred keeping things separate. I think it would be nice. You met Dominic. James considered, then shook his head. Maybe eventually. We are still figuring things out. And I do not want to complicate anything by rushing into couple friends territory. Couple friends. Like what he and I used to be with other people. The night before Dominic's deadline, James came home from another Sophie date, glowing like he had won the lottery. Hummed, getting ready for bed. Smiled at his phone. Moved through our apartment like floating on air. Good date? I asked casually. Really good, he said. And that smile could have powered our building. That is when I knew I could not go to New York. Not because I did not want Dominic, but because I could not bear watching James be this happy, knowing I would never be the reason again. I told Dominic the next morning I was staying. He called me a coward, said I was wasting my life, told me I would regret choosing security over passion. Maybe he was right, but I would rather regret staying than running from the mess I had made. Dominic left for New York without saying goodbye, and I was alone with my husband and the ghost of what we used to be. Dominic's departure left me in an emotional free fall I was not prepared for. For months, he had been the exciting center of my world, making me feel alive and desired. Without him, I was just Valerie again, married to a man who had become a stranger. James seemed completely unaffected by Dominic's absence. When I mentioned my friend moved to New York, he just nodded. That must be hard. No follow-up questions. No curiosity. No recognition that someone important had vanished from my life. Meanwhile, his relationship with Sophie was clearly escalating. Going out 3, sometimes 4 nights a week, staying out later, coming home with that satisfied glow, meaning things were going very well. Sometimes he would not come home until morning, claiming he had fallen asleep at a friend's house after late nights out. The lies were transparently insulting. James had never been a good liar, but his obvious deception made me angrier than honesty would have. I started feeling invisible in my own marriage. James would come home, barely acknowledge I existed, shower, change, grab something from the kitchen, disappear with his phone. The man who used to want every detail of my day couldn't be bothered asking about work. One night, I could not take it anymore. James was getting ready for another Sophie date, humming while picking clothes, checking his reflection like preparing for something important. "We need to talk," I said from the doorway. He glanced at me in the mirror. "Can it wait? I am meeting Sophie in an hour. It is about us. About our marriage." That got his attention. He turned around, and for a second I saw the old James. Concerned, attentive, ready to drop everything for me. "What is wrong?" I took a deep breath. "I want to close the marriage. Go back to just being us." The words hung between us. I watched his face for surprise, relief, happiness that I was ready to recommit. Instead, he looked confused, uncomfortable, maybe panicked. "Close it? Why?" "Because this is not working. We barely talk. We are like strangers. I miss what we used to have." James sat on the edge of our bed, running hands through his hair. "Valerie, this was your idea. You wanted this arrangement." "I know. But things change. Dominic is gone. And I realized what I really want is focusing on us again." "Dominic is gone," he repeated slowly. "So, now that your outside relationship ended, you want me ending mine?" The way he phrased it made it sound selfish and manipulative. "It is not about Dominic. It is about getting back to what really matters." "What really matters?" he said with an edge I had never heard. "Valerie, you spent months barely looking at me unless you needed something. You turned our marriage into a business arrangement so you could have fun with your lawyer friend. And now that he has moved away, you want me giving up the first real happiness I have felt in years." "Real happiness?" The words hit like physical blows. "You are happy with her?" James's face softened slightly. "But not for me." "Yeah, I am. Sophie makes me feel like myself again. Like who I was before I started trying so hard to be what you wanted. I never asked you to be anything other than yourself. You did not have to ask. You made it clear. Myself was not enough." He stood up, grabbing his jacket. "I am not ready to close this, Valerie. I am not ready to give up what I have found with her." Panic rose in my chest. "So what does that mean for us?" "I do not know. But I am not making big decisions right now. I am finally happy. And I am not apologizing for that." He left for his date. And I sat on our bed, feeling dumped by my own husband. Over the next weeks, I tried everything to get his attention back. Cooked his favorite meals, suggested activities we used to enjoy, bought lingerie Dominic had liked. Nothing worked. James was polite but distant, present but unavailable. It was like living with a ghost, a very fit, very handsome ghost who smelled like another woman. The breaking point came when I flat out asked him to choose. "Between me and Sophie, I need you to decide what is more important," I told him when he came home from another date. "Your marriage, or your girlfriend." James stopped taking off his jacket. "That is not fair, Valerie. What is not fair is watching my husband fall in love with someone else, and being expected to smile and support it." "You wanted this," he said, voice harder than I had ever heard. "You pushed for this arrangement. You set the rules. Now that things are not going your way, you want to change everything." "I want my husband back." James looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in his expression. Not anger, but something worse. Pity. "I cannot be that person anymore, Valerie. I cannot go back to being the guy who centered his world around making you happy, while you looked elsewhere for excitement. I will not do it." He grabbed clothes from our dresser, throwing them into a bag. Not dramatically, just methodically, like checking items off a list. "Where are you going?" "I am staying somewhere else for a while. Give us both space to figure out what we actually want." "James, please, we can work this out." He paused at the bedroom door, bag in hand. "Maybe we can. But not like this. Not with you trying to control the situation because you do not like how it turned out." That was 3 weeks ago. James left, and has not been back since. 2 weeks later, I got served divorce papers at work. James had filed for dissolution, citing irreconcilable differences, asking for his share of joint assets. The papers included a lawyer's letter explaining James wanted the process moving quickly. He was planning to remarry within the year, and wanted to start fresh without legal complications. Remarry within the year. The divorce was swift and civil. James was more than fair about everything. Let me keep most of the furniture. Did not fight the apartment lease. Even paid half the legal fees when he did not have to. We met once to sign papers. Seeing him was like looking at a stranger wearing my ex-husband's face. Tan. Confident. Wearing clothes that fit his personality. When he smiled at his lawyer, it was the genuine smile I remembered from our early dating days. "You look good," I told him. "Thanks, I feel good." He did not return the compliment. "Are you happy?" James considered seriously. "Like always." "Yeah, I really am. For the first time in a long time, I am exactly where I want to be. With exactly who I want to be with." 6 months later, I saw the wedding announcement on social media. James and Sophie had married in a small ceremony surrounded by family and friends. Photos showed them laughing, dancing, looking at each other like they could not believe their luck. James looked like the happiest man alive, and Sophie looked like someone who deserved to make someone that happy. They looked like people who had built something real together. I closed the laptop and looked around my empty apartment, the same place where I had started this mess, wanting something more exciting. The rent was too expensive for one person, but I could not bring myself to move. It felt like admitting defeat. Dominic had stopped answering my texts months ago. He had found someone new in New York. Someone without a complicated history and divorce baggage. I was 30 now. Single. Finally understanding the difference between wanting something and deserving it. I had wanted excitement, passion, options. I had gotten all those things briefly. What I deserved was losing the one person who actually loved me. While I was busy looking for something better, James found his happily ever after with someone who appreciated what he offered. Dominic found his fresh start with someone who could commit fully. And I was left with the consequences of thinking I could have everything without risking anything. The house always wins, they say. I just never realized I was betting against myself the whole time.